Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you a weekly update on the Russian aggression against Ukraine between August 21st and 27th. Last week, we noticed the decreasing dynamics of armed provocations and instances of heavy weapons use at the front line by the Russian proxies. The daily number of enemy ceasefire violations ranged between 18 and 35. Similarly, the enemy reduced the number of heavy weapons use that are prohibited by Minsk agreements. We're talking about 41 instances during last week, which is approximately 24% of all 173 truce violations. Now to the overall situation at the front line over the past week. Luhansk sector. Last week, Russia-backed militants continued to engage positions of Ukrainian armed forces with mortars and grenade launchers. On August 21st and 22nd, invaders opened mortar fire of medium intensity against Krymske and Novo-Alexandrivka, respectively. On August 24th, Russian proxies 2 times opened mortar fire against Katerinivka, having discharged nearly 25 mortar bombs toward positions of Ukrainian armed forces. In the subsequent days, the intensity of enemy fire significantly decreased, down to 1 ceasefire violation per day on Friday and Saturday. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 1 and 11. Donetsk sector. Last week, the intensity of enemy fire in the sector was the highest of all sectors. Invaders engaged positions of Ukrainian defenders in Avdiivka and other areas on a regular basis. On August 21st, Russia-trained militants opened complex fire with mortars, grenade launchers, infantry fighting vehicles, and small arms against positions of Ukrainian forces in Zaitsevo and Avdiivka. Ukrainian service members were forced to open fire in response. The total number of mortar bombs fired against the defense posts of Ukrainian army near Zaitsevo and Avdiivka that day totaled 90. On August 24th, Russia-equipped militants fired 25 mortar bombs at Troitske. On August 25th, invaders opened mortar fire against Avdiivka. On Saturday, pro-Russian militants engaged Avdiivka and Zaitsevo with small arms. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 7 and 16. Mariupol sector. Combat situation in the sector was rather unstable. On August 22nd, invaders multiple times engaged southern coastal positions of Ukrainian army with 122mm artillery, having fired more than 20 shells. That day, Russia-trained militants also discharged 30 mortar bombs at Hnutovo. On August 24th, Russian proxies engaged Chermolyk with mortars. On August 25th and 26th, invaders delivered small arms fire at positions of Ukrainian army in Pavlopil, Shirokine area. Last week, the daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 3 and 21. Over the week, Ukrainian troops registered 7 episodes of hostile drones conducting aerial reconnaissance at the front line in eastern Ukraine. Russia keeps supplying its proxies in eastern Ukraine. Over the previous week, Russia delivered over 1,500 tons of fuel and 5 main battle tanks to the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine. Additionally, Russian government sent the 68th so-called humanitarian convoy with unidentified cargo consisting of 56 trucks to its proxies in eastern Ukraine. Military intelligence reports that the number of confirmed casualties amongst Russian proxies is 9 killed and 17 wounded over the week. The enemy took most of its casualties near Gorlivka and in the southern part of Mariupol sector. Last week, 2 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in action. 13 service members were wounded in action. Additionally, on August 26th, One Ukrainian serviceman died of wounds previously received in action on August 19th in the Luhansk sector. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the fallen Ukrainian heroes. Residential and industrial areas in the frontline villages and towns again came under enemy fire. During the previous week, 7 private homes and 4 non-residential buildings were damaged as a result of enemy shellings. These incidents took place in Horlivka suburbs, Donetsk sector, and in Marinka, Mariupol sector. 6 of them were completely destroyed. We're talking about 4 residential houses and 2 non-residential buildings. Hostile actions of the enemy bring new sufferings to civilians living close to the contact line. Last week, 2 civilian women were wounded in the conflict area. Both of them suffered injuries as a result of booby trap explosions in the Mariupol sector. Last week, Ukrainian authorities arranged for access and safe passage through government checkpoints of 8 trucks loaded with humanitarian aid for civilians living in the temporarily occupied, uncontrolled territories of eastern Ukraine. 92 tons of medicine and building materials were provided by the International Committee of the Red Cross. That'll be all for today. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next week.